Torres del Paine in Patagonia, Chile. So, this is the summertime. This is Torre del Paine Park. Well, just think, it's the summer, and this is ice and snow. And in the back are the huge peaks of the towers. And it's just fascinating to see how it could be so cold all the way down to almost the south to Antarctica. I mean, well, Antarctica's still way down there, but I'm in Patagonia and it's summertime. So you can imagine winter, but that's right down here. So now we're gonna keep hiking up to the top of this incredible mountain. This is the hiking trail to Torres del Paine. The mountains here, the national park here in Chile, in Patagonia, where all the glaciers are. All of a sudden a huge storm hit and the trails are closing. And I am going to be sheltering here in these trees and waiting for this thing to pass. John Robert Sutton, summertime in Patagonia.
Coming up on the show.
Every farmer had guards, which means someone living with a machete in a tent to protect that crop. I mean, I saw it and I was like, what are these guys doing? They're like, well, they have to sleep here all night because the price of beans has gone so high up. We need these guys to guard them because people come during the night and they steal these beans. And they were actually, because the beans got so expensive, they were actually taking pins and making their own farms mark on every bean had a pin design on it. They were literally so that nobody could say debate where they got that bean from.
Wow.
Because people were stealing it.
You know, when it comes to spices, you think of the historical nature of them, you think of the health aspects and the flavor profile. And here I am with Mark Jacobs, the chairman of Watkins, a 150-year-old spice company. And I'm so grateful to have you to discuss all of this today.
Oh, thanks, John. I'm honored to be here.
With spices, and one of the things that you're really well known for is the finest vanilla in the country. Yeah. So can you tell me some of the places you've been to collect this vanilla?
Well,
I hear you went to Madagascar.
I did. Madagascar is the kind of the place. It's, right now I don't think it's about 80%, but at one time up to 85% of the world's supply of vanilla beans comes from Madagascar. So I did go to Madagascar. It was a wild experience. I went to the fields and met some of our farmers and kind of learned about the entire process from the time that bean is picked, or even before it's picked, because to grow vanilla beans, the orchids have to be hand pollinated. The vanilla orchid, there's no bees that can pollinate them in Madagascar, so they actually hand pollinate every orchid. And so I went from that level all the way down to see how it gets to when we bring it to Minnesota and make vanilla extract out of it.
Wow, I mean, so people don't realize that the vanilla bean actually comes from an orchid. It shouldn't even it's not really a bean. You know?
It's funny. The bean thing, you're right. I think the bean thing came from, it looks like a giant string bean.
Yeah, it does.
And, after you pick them, when they're ripe, you need to blanch them and, you heat them up and then you dry them out and there's, the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
So when you
sweat them.
Exactly. So when you see those kind of brown, little crinkly beans, they've already gone through a fair amount before we take them and then actually make an extract out of it.
Why are they so expensive? I mean, one bean can be, between $5 and sometimes more dollars. It's crazy.
It's a crazy commodity. When I went there, I learned, part of the reason I went there was to learn more about why that is, because about 5 years ago, the vanilla bean was about 8 times what it is right now. And they had this commodity crisis almost every decade. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit fake. They kind of create this in Madagascar. some greedy people and pretend there's a shortage, and it runs its course, and then it comes back down. But literally, the beans went from $30 a pound to $220 a pound, and now they're back down closer to that range. And it's really there's no cohesiveness with the farmers. There's more than 70,000 farmers who grow these beans. They all have little plots of land, and they just grow a few beans on their land. It's a real split up business, not controlled by any one farmer in Madagascar, which actually works pretty well, because if there's ever a disease that gets into their vanilla plants, or if there's hurricanes in that area, you don't have the whole crop go down.
And, the vanilla bean actually comes from a small part of Mexico called Papantla.
Yes.
Why don't you buy vanilla beans from Mexico?
There are some good beans coming from Mexico.
Sure.
It's a small amount. We need a lot of beans.
It is smaller production.
Yeah, and we need a lot of beans to make vanilla extract, especially since we make a lot of vanilla.
Yeah.
That's where we mostly work with Madagascar.
Sure, those beans, they mostly go to chefs that scrape out, when you cut that bean and they scrape out the pollen or what's in there.
Yeah, and then little seeds kind of.
Sprinkle it into, it's just incredible.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot more of that, the seeds. People like that, seeing that in their food. It gives a little texture, and it's kind of neat to see a real part of the bean in there.
I want to talk about the fact that the spice company, in a lot of ways, it is medicinal. So in a lot of ways, people are going back looking at spices as a way to combat modern day ailments, where medicine, sure, of course, is needed, but why don't you take a look at some of the things you offer, and let's talk about cinnamon.
No, it's very interesting, because there's a lot of regulations with the government about what we can say.
Absolutely.
So we're not allowed to say,
no,
which is funny that the drug companies are allowed to make certain claims. I guess they've done certain testing.
Yes.
But, there's a lot of evidence pointing to the benefits of cinnamon, especially on our blood sugar.
Yeah.
And that it really helps lower that. Sugar
cinnamon
levels.
cured Buddha of ailments. That's when he went down to the south. But
and a lot of spices, and turmeric, which I love. I put it in my smoothie every morning.
Yes.
But the problem is we need a lot more testing to do, very sophisticated testing. And the drug companies that really have the resources and the multi-billions to do this are not benefiting. They're not trying to sell spices.
Yes.
And companies like ours, what we would require medically to do to be able to make those claims is virtually impossible.
Sure.
So we know these spices have a lot of different properties, especially the anti-inflammatory thing. The challenge is what we're able to say.
Yes.
So you have to be kind of very careful. We can't put it on our label.
Why is that?
The government, I think the government's, maybe too protective, but they really, because it's interesting what they do let people say for certain things. For spices, one of my competitors put on, might have been cinnamon. They put a heart healthy thing on there, and they got nailed for it.
Yep.
They said, no, get that off the label. They said, well, there's a lot of evidence. I said, no, that's not.
You don't need an FBI raid.
We need a hardcore, Mayo Clinic, which I respect.
Yes.
Study, to make those claims. And you've got to do. Drug testing is extremely expensive. A lot of drugs don't ever make it to market that are good drugs in the U.S. just because they can't afford the different levels you have to get through for testing. So it's a very complicated process. So we can talk about the benefits. People research it and all, but it's a lot of hearsay.
Let's get back to cinnamon, because there is a huge diabetes problem. And a lot of it is of this massive intake of sugar that most people do when they don't realize it. And one of the things is coffee. People are putting sugar and the cream in the coffee, but they should be putting cinnamon there as a substitute.
Agree. I put cinnamon on everything, just because I love the flavor of cinnamon.
Sure. And people don't realize, what cinnamon is? It is bark. It's a bark that is peeled off a tree, and it's then dried out and it shrivels up into cinnamon sticks, and then you grind it, right?
Completely. And last week I was actually in India and saw a lot of cassia trees. And I was with some friends, and they saw it, and I'm like, what is that? I said, you know what that cassia, what that means? They're like, no. It's like, you don't know. That's where cinnamon comes from. That's where we get it. They have no idea that it comes from that bark.
No, really, a lot of people don't.
No. And when they see, once in a while, you'll see stores selling, we actually offer organic cinnamon sticks which we like to put in for, like
old
hot cider,
fashions and
old
drinks.
fashions.
Put a cinnamon stick in an old fashioned. I'm telling you.
It's the best. It's the absolute best. And spices and herbs, it's really fun to see them in their natural form.
Yeah.
And you can take a cinnamon stick and you can get a little flavor by grating it a little bit.
See, the reason why you want to grind something from, let's say, a cinnamon stick or a coffee bean, or you want to, grind the pepper, is because there's still moisture in there. So once you grind it and it's in a dust form, that means that there's a bigger evaporation rate and the tastes and the oils have kind of evaporated. So, but not everybody has the ability to grind it right away. But when you can grind something, that taste is so good.
Yeah, completely. And that is where your flavor comes from. So we take pride in our ground spices. We put them in nice glass bottles that create a nice containment system. So that the air won't get in there.
Doesn't evaporate everything. See, that's very important.
Yeah, and so
a lot of people don't do that.
And light isn't great for them either. So we recommend you keep them in your cupboard or in a cool place, because that light, everything that sucks out that oil, which is that volatile oil that gives you the flavor. So that's why spices, after a while, if they're not stored properly, they just don't last long, and they won't hurt you, but you'll see the flavor's gone. Yeah, you'll see even the herbs like a parsley. It's nothing green about it. It's just all brown and a ground parsley because it's so old that all the oils have come out of it. And that's where you lose the flavor.
Where do you see the spice market going in terms of exotic spices, like za'atar, for instance?
In America, we were pretty much a lot of salt and pepper, meat and potatoes kind of diet. And, hot foods. I did not grow up in Minnesota with hot foods.
No
it's very Scandinavian. No, like ketchup was like, it's like you might as well have said like hot pepper sauce.
What's an avocado?
I got asked that question once checking out of a store. A young person had never seen it. They said, I said, forget it. It's okay.
An alligator egg. That's what they used to call
Have you ever had guacamole? Yeah, that comes in a jar. No, it comes from avocado. Whatever. In general, the whole world is, but Americans are becoming much more international, and you can go to any major grocer now and see a big collection of hot sauces and different spices and za'atar and things you cook in Moroccan food and Indian food. My kids, for example, my kids are 23 and 26. I mean, they grew up completely different from me, eating hot sauces and Indian food and stuff that I didn't have access to. But you can pretty much, no matter where you live in America now, walk into any major retailer or grocer, whether it's Walmart or Whole Foods, you can find a pretty good variety of spicy things. So I think the consumer has changed dramatically. So I see that shifting. We're seeing it already. Harissa, we do a nice harissa.
I introduced harissa from Tunisia to the United States.
Did you really?
About
I love it.
15 years ago.
It's fantastic with chicken, and it's fantastic.
It's in pizza, and now you see harissa just booming. Old fashioned has exploded, the drink. Even though it's been around a long time, it's kind of come and gone. Now it's exploded. Tell me what Watkins is doing to address the old fashioned craze.
Well, it's interesting. We a couple of things. One is we just came out with bitters.
What are bitters? What would someone
bitters,
use a bitter
the
for?
name bitter, it goes back to, from what I understand, back to Germany. And, they use the aromatics, the flowers, and distill them down into a digestive. So people used to have bitters, which is basically the aromatics and the flowers distilled down into this kind of bitter, and it would help you digest food.
Interesting.
So I believe they started in Germany long ago, bitters. And then people realized, well, when you add some flavors to these bitters, the most popular bitters is aromatic. That's kind of the generic one, which is just flowers. And it's a little bit of a bite to it. But when you add it to alcohol drinks, you lose that bite. It just adds a little bit of a flavor. But we also actually launched bourbon last year. So we do a Kentucky bourbon with our own natural orange spice flavor that we came up with.
So it's a drink. It's a liquid drink.
It's called Watkins Bourbon.
Wow.
Yeah, you'll start seeing it in stores.
With your own spices and everything
Well, it's a flavoring we developed. We had to do a liquid flavoring.
Okay.
Yeah, based on spices. You take the liquid forms and you mix those. Ours are 100% natural flavorings. And it's really delicious. We have an orange one, which is like an old fashioned. Then we also have a cinnamon apple one, which in the fall,
Why don't you bring that here?
I'm sorry,
all be
I know.
drinking.
I owe you some. I know. Well, it's recently launched, so it's not in California yet.
Okay.
The states.
Oh, yeah,
There's
the
distributors. It's moving right now. I think I've seen it in Nevada that far.
The second highest regulated industry behind nuclear energy is the alcohol business
Completely.
in the United States.
Well, we still have this kind of crazy triangle where you can't distill your own alcohol and then also have your own retail store and then we have a triangle set up that goes back to the Prohibition, which is really interesting.
So you just said that you have a museum
do.
On your property.
Yeah.
So you're a 150-year-old company.
Yeah.
Talk about the gentleman who founded it. This
Yeah.
rich history of a company this
Yeah.
old for the United States is incredible.
It is. And we've been operating since the 1800s where we are.
And I heard J.R. Watkins was known for coming out with the concept of a money-back guarantee and direct marketing.
Yes. Yeah. And that
Amazing.
I know. We take great pride in that. And, in the 1800s, in 1868.
Right after the Civil War, too.
Completely. Minnesota was, I think, 10 years old. Minnesota, I think, was 1858. There was no California, really. And the country, this is the Mississippi River, and that is where things were happening. That was as far west as things were happening in America. And that's where you had all the barges moving all the product. And
People moving to the west, that was kind of the frontier.
it was a frontier, and there was a lot of wealth. The little town... Railroads. The little town we're in, Winona, Minnesota, actually at one time was the wealthiest per capita in the United States back in the 1800s. So we've got this old historic buildings, and it's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But JR, we take great pride in him because we still take seriously what he stood for. And it was all, in those days, I think there were a lot of snake oil salesmen. It was the Wild West, people selling things on horse and buggies. And he said, no, I'm selling quality. And if you don't believe me, you can use my product up till the trial mark, which is a little mark we still put on our bottle. And that trial mark is if you use up to just that trial mark and you're not happy, when you came back through town, you say, hey, come, I'll give you your money back. Of course, he didn't have to give people their money back because they were happy with it. But it was the first documented money back guarantee in 1869.
I mean, you really are a bespoke spice company, food company. There's just not many out there that you're doing.
No, there aren't. And I try to tell people, look, I take great pride in our quality because I know how hard we work to source it from the best places, how it's handled properly, that we have organic suppliers that actually deliver the quality we expect. We have our own labs. The other thing is a lot of people make their own spices or they bottle them in their garage or whatever because, you can blend spices wherever you want, but they don't have their own labs where you can test for microbes and germs.
Quality control. Temperature control. Supply chain.
All that stuff. And so the fact that we're vertically integrated, we take great pride that we, when a batch of cinnamon bark comes in, if it's supposed to be 1.1% volatile oil and it's, we test it and we'll reject the cinnamon if it's
got to be incinerated.
We just reject it. Someone will buy it. Yeah. But that's the brokers, probably whoever sold it to us. Mm-hmm. But the fact that we can test, when our vanilla beans come from Madagascar, they've gone through a whole process. But then we test again. We have our own lab so we can test and make sure the parts per million of vanillin, which is where the flavor comes from, is in that bean that we were promised.
Yeah. A lot of people have to understand that buying your product, you're actually helping directly thousands of farmers all over the world.
Yeah.
And when you look at, from the pepper groves, whether they're in India or Vietnam or whatever, and people have to realize that there is a human element to this.
Yeah.
And how do you see the responsibility of your company to that concept?
Well, a good example would be, you're right, like in Madagascar, these farmers, they're in the middle of nowhere. They're not very sophisticated. They don't have access to the world markets. They're not selling it to a retailer. So from the time they sold that bean and it got to a collector, another middle person, an exporter, and made it to my factory, it's just the way it goes.
Yes.
Because the farmers just they're in the middle of, Madagascar is one of the poorest countries on the planet Earth. Mm-hmm. So, part of it is, giving back. You try to find good organizations you can give back, some of your profits to help these communities. But it does come down to people. That's why I went to the farms and saw myself, the the growers, and these are people growing things for their livelihood, and they care. I mean, this is it. I mean, if you're a vanilla farmer in Madagascar, I mean, those are your babies. I mean, it takes 3 years to flower. When it's ready, and hopefully they flower really well, so you have a good year and get a lot of beans produced, and the weather has to be right.
I mean, it's living thing. It's not software,
No, but it is fragile, because you need that 3 years to flower. So if you think of how much this farmer has to put into this, their heart and soul. I mean, when vanilla prices went way up, when I was there, it was a commodity crisis, and every farmer had guards, which means someone living with a machete in a tent to protect that crop. I mean, I saw it and I was like, what are these guys doing? They're like, well, they have to sleep here all night because the price of beans has gone so high up. We need these guys to guard them because people come during the night and they steal these beans. And they were actually, because the beans got so expensive, they were actually taking pins and making their own farms mark on every bean had a pin design on it. They were literally so that nobody could say debate where they got that bean from.
Wow.
Because people were stealing it. It's fascinating to see how they, take care of these crops.
And there's so much fake vanilla out there. That's why you really got to be careful the company you're buying from, because you've gone through that process, that supply chain, that closed supply chain where you know where it's coming from and you're using real vanilla. There's so much fake vanilla flooding the market.
Vanilla. I mean, the good news is fake vanilla, which would be artificial vanilla.
Yes.
You do have to, unless you're lying, you have to label it that way.
Yeah, but a lot of people.
But, you have to, because you can fake. It's not the same flavor, but you can fake it pretty good with vanillin stuff. So there is, and some people that just want the cheapest, which I think is kind of silly because you're doing a whole recipe, and to skimp on the teaspoon of vanilla, which is just a portion of that, which doesn't really cost that much, no matter how expensive the bottle is.
Yes.
But our vanilla story also, we pride ourselves on we're the only company that actually has an organic baking vanilla.
The organic label, I think people really want to know where the trees come from, what the terroir is, knowing that there aren't chemicals coming out of there. And that's mostly what you do.
I tell the consumer that you want to look for the USDA certification, because if you don't have USDA certification, you're probably lying.
Yeah.
And the USDA does a pretty darn good job of having these processes in place. And we're audited heavily. It's our factory. We got people coming to us all the time. Also, the retailers, I'd say, do a much better job now of wanting to know what's on their shelf. So a lot of our retail partners, they send people and say, well, I want to see the factory. And I want to send a company in to evaluate them and make sure they're buying from sustainable places. They're doing what they say they do. So it's gotten pretty good now from a sustainability standpoint.
So there is, there is a counterfeit, or for lack of a better term, spices that aren't necessarily organic and coming from suspicious sources that have no real labels on there. And then there's the Watkins brand that has absolutely gone through every single, government label, everything. And that's what people really need to understand. Correct.
And you can take pepper and grind it in your home and in your garage and put it in a bottle and say, hey, I have a pepper, and it's just buy cheap peppercorns, and, it's a lot of pepper dust, we call it. So there's very little volatile oil in there. And there are brands out there that are super cheap, and there's a reason for it. They're using the lowest quality pepper or whatever that spice is. And they're not the most, you wouldn't be impressed if you saw their factories as far as their food safety practices. And you want to know they've got their food safety practices in place. So, it really does matter.
Plus, treat yourself to, you're eating it. You're giving yourself this incredible taste. You go cheap, you pay twice in this type of stuff,
Completely. And, we pride ourselves on, we are a mass luxury, mass gourmet product. So we are competitively priced because we want our consumers to enjoy our products, as many as possible, but we're not going to be the cheapest stuff, but we're well priced.
So, you handed me this chili, this organic gourmet seasoning mix. Things have changed even 20 years ago. I mean, you have scientists, you have specialists gathering all of these spices, putting into a mix for chili now. So it's not that crazy to make chili anymore that tastes incredible.
No, and part of that is the consumer. You know, we're all busy, overwhelmed, and I get a chili recipe and it tells me 6 different spices to use. Well, people they want blends, you know, put things together now. So blends, consumers demanding blends where you pre-mix things for them. So hey, throw that in your chili recipe and you've got your spices all set. So we're doing a lot more things like that.
Yeah, I just noticed, you know, no GMO, which is a big thing for people.
Yeah.
No MSG.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all here when you really look at these
spices.
things. Yeah.
It's spices. And we do a lot of testing in our kitchen. It's kind of fun. We use our own employees to test things, and we always, you know, they'll be doing chili testing in the kitchen, and we'll try different blends and see how they taste.
You know, mustard is a spice, mustard seed.
Yep.
Do you do anything with that?
We do mustard. We do mustard. Oh yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
we do pretty much all spices you can think of. The only one we don't do right now is saffron, because it's great. It's just it's so expensive, and the demand for it is just small. But real cooks love saffron. I mean, so we'll probably have a saffron soon, but the stores just don't. The demand in America for saffron is not there yet.
You know, obviously you know where big saffron comes from, Iran.
Iran.
And you know that a lot of
By the way, India too has some pretty good saffron.
And Sicily.
Yeah.
And in Italy, Sicily, they have a famous cheese there, the ricotta saffarano, and all these incredible saffron dishes. You wouldn't know that. And, but people think you can't get foods and stuff from Iran. You can. I mean, it's not totally banned because they're
sometimes
not
it goes through a different country too.
Yeah, it goes through the UAE, you know, where Dubai is a lot.
Right, completely. And when you go to India, you even see some of these spice market stuff selling things that they're not from India.
Yeah.
You know they brought that in from Iran, but they can ship it out of India and say this came from India.
They do. And you know what they do that a lot of is everyone thinks Himalayan salt comes from India.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It comes from Pakistan.
Yeah. Yeah.
So are you going to go with me to Pakistan and get some
actually,
salt?
I actually would love to go to Pakistan. I'm an adventurous.
See, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, people have to understand that these spices are coming from places of the world that are remote, exotic, and they've been coming there for thousands of years.
Completely.
You know, I mean, pepper. You know, pepper's a fruit. Right.
The peppercorn, you know, was, you know, the king of spices because kings actually used it for trading. I mean, peppercorn was a form of currency.
Interesting. You know, did you know Ramses II, when they uncovered his body, they found peppercorn stuffed up his nose?
No, I did not know that. That's fantastic.
That's a little tidbit.
That is
there.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I love it.
And then even Pliny the Elder, he wrote about pepper when the galleons would come up and drop it off in Rome. So it's really fascinating.
It is fascinating.
The discussion we had, why does it all matter?
We put pepper on our food every day. We use spices in our life every day. And a lot of times we're not very mindful of what we're putting into our bodies and what we're using. And so for me personally, it really matters that we know what company's behind what we're putting in our body. Where are they sourcing it? What are their ethics? You know, we things don't just grow in a bottle. So I think and I think all of us want to be more mindful in our eating. You know, it's healthier to know what the heck we're cooking with and what the heck is going to our body and how it actually gets. You know, it impacts people in their lives. You know, starting with a farmer and a grower, all the way to the grocer, into your home. So I think, you know, a lot of us, myself included, are working to be more mindful, you know, and be smarter consumers, healthier consumers, eat better, find ways, especially with spices, because spices, you know, the data is already there that salt and sugar in excess are not great for you.
Yes.
And you don't need those with spices. So, you know, it's all about your health as well, you know, healthier cooking.
Yeah. So I walk into your company and I'm looking around. Give me somebody in your company that matters to all of this.
Okay. Well, everybody, but I'll give a shout out to Jackie, who's our head of quality control. And she really is the gatekeeper, so that, when we receive bulk spices or cinnamon bark, peppercorns, whatever those are, she's in charge of the labs, in charge of all of the food safety and quality. And she takes it. She's just a sweetheart. And she considers every bottle of Watkins spice, she's got her name on that too. And we have a lot of that in our factory, a lot of people that just really care. But I got to give Jackie a shout out, because she watches our quality like no other. And it will not go in a Watkins bottle if it's not worthy.
So she'll reject a load of something.
Oh, well, she'll reject anything if it doesn't meet our standard, because we have our 155-6-year reputation to lose every bottle we make.
Yeah.
So it's just not worth it for us to cut corners.
So all of these incredible spices, Watkins, where do we find this? Where can we go? We've heard about this. Where can we go and buy it and try it?
Specialty grocers. You
just said Erewhon here in Los Angeles.
Erewhon, we're the primary spice line.
That says it all. That's like the holy grail of markets, everybody.
Yeah.
What does that tell you?
But we also do, mass grocers, Target, the Ralphs of the world, has a big bottle of our vanilla at the Kroger's, Ralph's Kroger. We sell to everybody different parts of our line. You can also go online, to our Watkins 1868 website. You can buy us. You can buy us on Amazon.
Well, I really appreciate having you here and seeing you in person.
Thank you, John.
It's really wonderful talking with you. And I can't wait to go on an adventure.
Yeah, let's go to Pakistan and get some saffron or something.
Himalayan salt, saffron.
Himalayan salt, yeah.
Definitely.
All right, another episode in the books. Back to the Digestive. John. Yeah. Great episode. It looks like you're in a hotel. Where are you today?
I'm in Venice, Italy right now, and it's just before the Biennale starts on Saturday. So tomorrow is the big opening night dinners, chefs from around the world, and it's a big day here in Venice, Italy.
I think you had mentioned something about saffron cheese in this episode. Is that where you are? Is that a different part of Italy?
It's a different part of Italy. That's way down in Sicily, and it's pecorino saffarano, which is pecorino cheese, which is a hard cheese that you grate over things with saffron in it. And there's saffron that's grown down in Sicily, and they mix it with the cheese. It turns yellow, like if you ever see saffron rice, it's yellow. It's the same thing with cheese. It's so good, yeah.
Don't doubt Italians and their cheese. I thought another thing I wanted to quickly chat about, you brought it, I know we had some great talks about vanilla today. We talked about Madagascar obviously being a prominent player, but you said you have some experience in Mexican vanilla. Remind me, what's the place, the origin region that it's from?
It's called Papantla, and it's the region where if you see the indigenous natives that swing on these poles and come down, that's the Papantla natives. And that valley is where vanilla genetically and historically only grew. And, when Westerners encountered the Aztec kings, they were drinking vanilla drinks, hot vanilla and cocoa drinks. And that was the only region in the world it grew, that they knew of it. And they tried for hundreds of years to pollinate it. And they never could figure out why, because it was done by very small flies that were only in that region. And then somebody figured it out, took it from that valley, brought it to Tahiti and Madagascar, and the rest is history. But if you want to know where genetically it started, it's in Papantla, Mexico.
Papantla, that is a great party fact right there. I don't think most people know that. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's because I knew you on a different podcast, but is that the region that was hit by, was it a meteor or a volcano, and that's why it became such a lush and that's part of the whole origin story of vanilla?
I honestly, it's a theory of mine where if you actually look at the Gulf of Mexico, so if you take Merida and you take Houston, there's a gulf there. Why is it a huge circle? Because that's where a massive meteor slammed into the earth and created that circle, and all the ejecta that went way up into the Earth's atmosphere and came crashing down built Florida, built the island of Cuba, created the peninsula of the Yucatan. That's why there's no rivers there, and it's all, done like it is. Cuba's full of bauxite, that's minerals. And you know what? There was such a huge jolt in the Earth's biological makeup that many unique things started growing up in that area, such as vanilla, such as tomatoes, such as cacao, and other species of animals and fauna and flora that there's no other description than that, in my opinion.
So you're saying that we're all a little piece Mexican at the end of the day?
I believe so, because all of these things are our makeup. It's like, if the dinosaurs weren't wiped out, what would we have become? The butterfly effect, as they say. So, hey, thank you, asteroid, for slamming into the Earth, or else I don't think we'd be here.
You also had thrown, I don't think we didn't get to touch too much about it, but back in the spice world, you had said you brought harissa into the U.S. What's the story on that? And the 15 years ago it was?
Yeah, about that. I was doing an enormous amount of business in Tunisia. I had gone there, looked at everything, worked with a local partner, and we saw that harissa was kind of a boutique thing in the U.S. No one knew about it. Harissa is from essentially Tunisia, and it's a mixture of peppers and oils and smashed all together into a paste with spices. And I'm like, this tastes so good to rub on meats that I imported it into Trader Joe's. So it's really kind of what I do, is take really ethnic items that most people from there would bring ethnically to little ethnic markets in the U.S. I don't. I bring them to large-scale distribution and introduce these things into mid-market America. So I brought that into Trader Joe's. They took it and they put it all across the country, and bam, I introduced harissa into the United States. Thank you.
Well, we're so lucky. We're so lucky to be in your presence. So you said harissa, unfortunately, is made in the U.S. Now, if harissa is a mixture, as a blend, and my understanding, it's kind of like an oil, correct? But wouldn't that be better to be made locally, regionally, than imported? I get you brought the concept over, but wouldn't it make more sense to be made as close to the source or to your location as possible?
It's funny, in Italy they have something like the 0 mile, where everything is so close to you that's the special thing. But there's other people here that have what's called the good mile, which means I'm going to get it from anywhere as long as it's tasty and really good. I don't want to sacrifice something just because it's close, I have to buy it. Most of the products suck that are close to a lot of places, around the U.S. So why in the world do you have to always be local? It's like, ooh, the good thing to do. Wait a minute, the food's got to taste good, everybody. Then let's go local. Give me a break.
I think there's something noble about supporting your local economy, but Mark talked about it a little bit in this episode. The United States sort of race to the bottom with everything, get the cheapest quality ingredient you can just because it's convenient. And that is one thing that, we were very lucky to have a great brand, a great guest on today, Watkins. They are not the cheap guys. They're a good, high quality brand. And I don't know about you. I mean, I haven't really thought about the spice brands I'm purchasing a lot. Now, after this episode, I feel really confident. I can go evaluate things, and I feel like I know what I'm looking at now moving forward.
Yeah, look, everything is organic that they make. Everything is highly sourced that they make. Do I really want to talk to somebody that has a bunch of junk in a bottle that you shake onto your food? I don't need to. I don't want to. Why? But Mark and his company is legit. And so everything you have out of there is something that I would put into my body. And so there's the saying, if you go cheap, you pay twice. So, just kind of look out and spend the extra nickel and do yourself a favor and put something in your body that's going to make you and your body happy.
And with that, another digestif in the books. Thank you again to Mark Jacobs and Watkins. A wonderful person and a wonderful brand. We'll see you guys next time on Foods That Matter.
See you a bit. And thank you, Mark, for dropping those spices off at the doorstep of my house. That was awesome. Take care, everybody. Bye. The executive producers of Foods That Matter are A.J. Mosley and Stuart Halpern. Editing by A.J. Mosley. Marketing by Katrin Skapertis. Music by Jenny G. And I'm your host, John Sutton. And until our next journey, stay hungry.